At this point, I think most people know that, John, you and I are doing a sponsor exclusive show every Friday on Patreon and Subscribestar. You and I have been working together for 2.5 years or something like that, right? You are bringing forward constantly shocking information. How are you tonight, John?
Um, well,
That's good. That's very good. Now, the thing that we want to announce to everybody is that tonight we've decided to do this broadcast on our publicly accessible channels so that our sponsors and the general public alike can see this information, because the expectation is that minds will be blown. Oh no, is everything okay over here? Okay. It's always a question with the technology, because it's not as easy as it looks. And, you and I had a little bit of a discussion. You're going to be telling us some more about Phil Haney. We were speaking
mm,
about Phil a couple weeks ago, and
mhm.
everybody knows that Phil Haney was the Department of Homeland Security whistleblower who played a pivotal role in the Holy Land Foundation trial. He was working with our friend Laura Loomer, exposing all kinds of serious problems as far as jihadi infiltration into the United States. You've found something that you're going to be sharing with us. Why don't we get right to it, John? What have you got?
Sure. Well, I have been publishing videos over the course of the last couple of weeks, taking a look at the coronavirus impact in various countries uh, in the world. I started looking across Asia because the virus began in Asia. And so if you look at my channel, I think you'll see maybe a video or two about coronavirus in Singapore. I think I did two of them about Singapore. I did one of them about Wuhan, taking a look at what did the lockdown look like in Wuhan. And again, like most of my research, I don't necessarily draw a conclusion from this. I'm just looking at what did it look like in Singapore, right? What does the experience look like in Singapore? How is it different from what you're showing everybody as you're walking around New York City by yourself and with Charles and doing your tours? How is it different? How is it similar? And what kind of results are they getting compared to what we're getting, right? Does the
Yep.
lockdown look that different? Are the results the same or different? And again, I don't know that I'm necessarily drawing any conclusions as much as I want to put the evidence out there for people to look at and to draw their own conclusions. So there's two videos about Singapore. There's one about the Wuhan lockdown, and the Wuhan lockdown is a fascinating video. It's very interesting to see this from inside Wuhan and to see that perspective. To what degree you think it might be propaganda or whatever, draw the conclusion after you watch the video. But 1 month in Wuhan, COVID-19, 1 month in Wuhan, 35-minute look at what happened, and it only has 3,000 views. And I think it'll give people an interesting perspective if you haven't seen this yet, if you haven't seen the videos on Singapore. Um, just what are they doing in these other countries? And is it working? And
Right.
what they thought was working in Singapore turned out to not be working as well as they were hoping it would. And so they had to double up. And so what I've been doing is looking at other countries. And since the last show that we did, since last week, I was looking at Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and Thailand and Myanmar and Bangladesh and India. And as soon as I got to India, the spidey sense, right? Something hit.
Uh-huh.
Tablighi Jamaat. Now, I didn't know about Tablighi Jamaat until our paths crossed Phil Haney.
Right. And I didn't know about it until you told me about it, because these are complicated stories with lots of details.
Indeed.
I was aware of Phil Haney, but learned quite a bit more about him when you and I did a show about Phil. I got to speaking with Laura Loomer after that. Phil
Mm-hmm.
Haney was killed. He was shot in the
It
chest
appears
with a
that way.
shotgun, right? Well, it was originally
I'm not
called a
sure. I'm not
suicide.
sure about the weapon.
I'm
Yeah,
not
I'm
sure
not
about the
sure about
weapon,
the
but it was a
weapon.
shot to the chest.
And I did a couple of documentary videos about Phil Haney and his work and his death, and talked about, who he was investigating, what kind of claims he was putting forward. But at that time, that investigation and the coronavirus seemed worlds apart. What would one have to do with the other? What,
Right.
I would never have connected these dots. This was the work we were doing. In fact, if you look at the video, are we looking at the videos chronologically? I think we are, right?
I guess.
So these Phil Haney videos, if you click on, what was, pick one of the ones that I did and how long ago did I post it, right? What was the date?
Well, we
And that's
got
what we
this
were
one's a
working on
month
back then.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe a month, 6 weeks back, what have you. So that's what we were working on before we got to the coronavirus stuff.
Yep.
And the coronavirus sort of took all conversations on everything to coronavirus, right? For everybody everywhere. But we were talking about Phil Haney right before this. And I get to India, and basically what I do is I watch video in each of these countries. I download the video. So right now I've got an archive of Korea, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, wait do you guys see what's happening in Indonesia? This is unbelievable. Let's show everybody this. Is just real interesting. Go to YouTube, type in Indonesia coronavirus ghosts. Indonesia
coronavirus ghosts.
And
what is that going to bring up?
You'll see. Pick one. NBC, Global News. Pick one. It's okay. Any of them.
Village uses ghosts to scare people into staying home. Oh, wow. I mean, come on. Are people falling for that? Well, they look scared.
They just fell down. They literally fell down.
Wow.
So this is the strategy. So this is the strategy in Indonesia, right? So if Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx want to start looking for best practices, and they pick up the phone, they call Indonesia, what they're going to find is Indonesia has people dressing up as ghosts to scare people back into the house. And so that's one approach. Not necessarily the one that I would recommend if you were to ask for my recommendation, but that's one approach. And I'm watching these videos in different countries, and I'm looking at what they're doing in Japan. What's Prime Minister Abe doing? What are they doing in South Korea? What are they doing in Thailand? What are they doing in Vietnam? Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos still have nobody dead. No one's reported dead.
Right.
So I'm not sure, but no one's reported dead in Vietnam, Cambodia, or Laos so far. So what we're looking at right now on the screen, this is a heat map of influenza in the United States. Now, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, haven't we? We've been talking about the influenza outbreak that's been going on simultaneously with COVID, haven't we?
Absolutely. And, while you take that drink and before we get into the heat map, I just want to give people a little background about what's going on in this image that we created for today, because I think most people know I'm creating the artwork, and there's usually a conversation, but schedules are tight and everything. A lot of people may have noticed Bill Gates, Al-Walid bin Talal, this photograph of a young Indian girl who's obviously paralyzed, Al-Walid and Jamal Khashoggi. And when you told me about a possible Al-Qaeda connection, my thoughts immediately turned to the other connections that are part of this whole coronavirus outbreak. And this is not just whimsical stuff that I'm arriving at. The thing that is sort of unique about my position as the host of Crowdsource the Truth, it's like this hub and spoke wheel analogy where
that's your role. That's your role.
You and all the co-hosts and the viewers and everyone who's bringing information to us, you guys are the spokes, the wheel. I'm sitting at the hub.
We can't. So if you look at, you've had Dr. Corsi on, you've had Kevin Shipp on, you've had, I mean, on and
Charles
on and on, right?
Ortel, Mike Moore,
Well,
David
Charles, yeah, yeah,
Hawkins, the
yeah, right. But
Moriartys.
we all, so let's call us the investigative journalists who are kind of part of your universe, your, your, I don't know what you want to
Crowdsource the
call it,
truth
but
family.
there you go. We can't possibly watch each other's show
Correct.
every week and do the research that we're doing. So that's why your role as the guy in the middle who is you're the only one who gets to watch every one of your shows. Not even anybody, there's no one in your audience who can really say, I've watched every single one of Jason's shows, but you have.
Yeah.
Jason has been there for every single Crowdsource the Truth show. So you pull it together. You're the glue. And you have heard things from David Hawkins, from Charles, from Kevin. I have not heard that stuff. Right. So
and see,
you
that's
have to
where I
bring
can
that.
share that information with you guys.
Right.
And again, I'm not drawing a conclusion, but I'm pretty close to that. I mean, it's not like a conclusion that I could take into court, but I am very confident that Bill Gates and various people associated with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and some of the other foundations that he has given grants to, made donations to, I think he knows a lot more about what's going on with this coronavirus outbreak than perhaps has come to light yet. Dr. Corsi presented information yesterday that I realized today was sent to me by another viewer last week, and I apologize to that viewer. As the hub, I'm being flooded with so much information, it's very, very difficult for me to keep up as one person. But I firmly believe that Bill Gates and his foundation need to be investigated thoroughly. And when you spoke to me about an Al-Qaeda connection, well, the first person I thought of when the idea of Bill Gates and the idea of Al-Qaeda smashed together in my head is Al-Walid bin Talal, close friend and business associate of Bill Gates. They co-own the Four Seasons Hotel together. There's a lot of conversation that you and I have had about the Four Seasons Hotel with regard to the Las Vegas shooting. And it's been really explored on Crowdsource the Truth, this notion that how do we have a viral outbreak that goes from China to Italy, totally skips over India. It just did not seem like an organic spread of a viral infection, and it did in fact seem like it could possibly be delivered to key places, targeted locations, and I'd like to explore that with you today, John.
Well, certainly we know that Iran was hit hard, and Iran has suffered a much tougher go at this than Saudi Arabia. We know that again, the numbers that we're citing here are all from the Johns Hopkins CDC/WHO dashboards. So that's what we're using as our data source, is the stuff that you see on TV. So if you go to the Johns Hopkins
and give us a quick overview, John, of why we've chosen to do that. We're not endorsing this data, but why don't you tell everybody the methodology there?
Okay. This is, for all intents and purposes, the de facto map that you're going to see on television, and it's developed using software from a company called ESRI. And behind the picture is data in a spreadsheet. Effectively, it's a database, but it looks like a spreadsheet. And that data and this map are something that I played a role in configuring originally 30-something years ago. So I was a pioneer of this system. And what I saw in it when I first saw the map was a certain degree of, I guess we can call it deception, in that there appears to be no good news on the map whatsoever. And if Jason were to click on a country like Vietnam or a country like Laos or a country like Cambodia, no one's dead, and it's still red. And so if that doesn't get if you don't get a green dot for nobody being dead in a country that borders China, what do you get
Right.
a green dot? What do you get a green dot for? So if you go to Mongolia, um,
I wish there was a way to sort this alphabetically because being educated in a public school in America, my
you
knowledge
don't
of
know how to
geography
find
is
Vietnam.
terrible. Yeah.
All right, go down the east coast of China. Just follow the east coast of China, and you get to Vietnam. Go south down the east coast of China, and it takes you to Vietnam. You've already passed it. You're past Bangkok already.
This is bad.
Zoom
It's
out.
embarrassing.
Yeah, you got
There's
to zoom
Korea.
out one level. There's
Oh,
South Korea.
yeah. I see.
And
If
you,
they could
yeah.
develop a better way to search the map, that would help me a lot.
So that it's again, this information is hiding in plain sight, right? We're not hacking anything. We're not going in through a back door. It's right here. It's right in front of you. But if you go look at Vietnam and you go look at Cambodia, I mean, they're right in front of you. Just click on them. I see them. Scroll down from China.
This monitor is further away from me than you might realize,
Oh,
and I
I see.
can't
I
read
got you.
any
I
of the
see. I
type.
see. I got you. I
There's
see.
Laos. There we go.
Okay, yeah. Click on Laos.
Ah,
Click on the red
and
thing.
I'm telling you, man, the zoom functions. This map kills me. I hate it.
I didn't actually build this map, right,
Well,
per
it's
se.
clearly made by Bill Gates because the software interface is terrible. So here's Laos.
Click on the red dot. You have to click on the red dot.
I'm colorblind, John. I can't see the red dot. Why don't they make a way to alphabetically search for crap? But tell us what you're going to tell us. People get the idea. There's no deaths.
Right. There's nobody dead in Laos, and so you guys can pull this up. I think it says sick map on Drudge Report, and if you click on the sick map on Drudge Report, you can pull this up and open up a separate window, and you can look at this in real time with us. And if you click on Laos, if you click on Cambodia, if you click on Vietnam, I think at the moment no one's dead. And so the question is that really true, or is the World Health Organization just not showing up in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, and Burma? I think Burma has a handful. Myanmar has a handful of cases.
I just don't understand how they make a database that you can't quickly search alphabetically. I mean, I'm setting aside
It's a
complaints.
great question.
It's a great question because if we really wanted this map to be a functional way to locate data, switching the thing to list alphabetically, list by the density, list by all this stuff, you'd want to search it. They're just presenting it to you in such a way that it creates immediate shock when you look at it, and it's got red dots all over the world that no matter what language you speak, whether you've looked at a computer interface ever before, this looks like a bloody mess all over the map.
And even though if you go to Mongolia borders China, right? They share a border. They share a long border.
And how does it not spread? This is what I'm getting at. And we've also seen other evidence that causes us to believe that there could be other ways that it's spreading. A video was shared with me a while ago by a Crowdsource the Truth viewer. And this is another area of strength where Crowdsource the Truth really is able to do work that a single person could never do.
Exactly.
Someone found this video or shot this video, and is it staged? I mean, we have no way of knowing, but this looks like a video from a modern cell phone. No reason to believe it's staged.
I want to talk about normalcy bias because normalcy bias is something we've been talking about. And people would say, oh no, something like this could never happen. Because you've
people
never
have said
seen
maybe this
something.
woman's got OCD. That's possible, but she doesn't seem to be behaving like someone with OCD. She seems to be engaging with the woman in line who's video recording her. She's obviously got a process that she's doing. She's got this. See, let's look at this a second, John, because we've played this video many times, but I want to analyze it with you for just a moment. This woman's carrying a cup, right?
Right.
It's got a lid on it. There's no straw in it, right?
Doesn't appear to be.
No
and
straw.
She has a notepad, and it
is it a
appears
notepad or is it a napkin or something? It looks to me like she could be wetting this with material in the cup, putting it on her hands and rubbing it all over this stuff.
Absolutely.
I see no straw there. Who's walking around with a sealed drink with no straw?
So this is what I mean. Normalcy bias is just because something's never happened before doesn't mean it can't happen. And what again, I hate to kind of accuse, so I'm not necessarily accusing, but I'm asking, is it possible that this was used, that this virus was used deliberately
As a weapon.
and based on that evidence and that evidence alone, I think it becomes a possibility. I think it does. And I think it becomes a possibility that we have to consider and start asking, is there other similar evidence that would further bear that out? Right. And so to the audience, if you guys see anything like that, take your camera out and film it. That took a lot of guts for that woman to film it and then to confront that woman. And the fact that she kept going, right? By the way, one of the biases that I've never talked about is it's like a social acceptance bias.
Right. People don't want a conflict like that.
Exactly. People don't want to upset other people, right? And it's one of the reasons why, people like me who are somewhere on the autism spectrum, they just don't care about upsetting people. Right? I just don't care. Right? It just doesn't matter to me. I just keep going and I keep looking at my numbers. Right?
That also happens if you live in New York.
Yeah, I guess so. And the combination is a doozy, right? So I just don't care, right? And I insult people all the time in my comments, right? I'm nasty. I'm a nasty guy.
You know what? I only insult people who come with insulting comments because there's just no tolerance for that. It's a waste of everybody's time.
Exactly. We're here to examine evidence. And, again, one of the things that you and I have been talking about for the last 2.5 years is a different deductive and inductive reasoning. And the fact that we've had to resort to inductive reasoning in other cases that we have been investigating because they're not putting 52 cards on the table. They're putting 36 cards and then a whole bunch of marked cards that are half this and half that. And when that happens, you're not playing with all of the facts. And so when we don't have all the facts, we have to use inductive reasoning. And so I think, again, with this coronavirus, it's the same sort of thing. We're using the facts that we have. We have the evidence that we have, the data. We put all that on the table. And we look at that and we pull the lens back a bit. And you have to be the ultimate director. I'm shooting one set of scenes, right? Kevin's shooting another, right? David's shooting another set. Charles is shooting another set of scenes. You're the ultimate director. I don't know what they're shooting.
It's a good analogy, and it's like a documentary director, because see, when you write a script and make a film, you know where you're going. But when you make a documentary, you just decide the subject. We're going to investigate corruption. We're going to investigate unsolved crimes, and you gather all your footage and you lay it out and you say, "Oh wow, look, this piece connects to this piece, connects to that." That is a very good analogy. And you see, John, as a result of that,
you had to convince me. Remember that? You had to convince me to look at this. I thought it was normal.
So the picture is starting to form in my mind, and my hypothesis is forming. It'll change as new evidence comes in, but I've already seen strong evidence that causes me to believe that what we are experiencing right now is a viral outbreak, but it's a man-made viral outbreak. And I believe that Bill Gates is a man who knows a lot about how it was made and how it was spread. And we've heard today that countries like Brazil that have resisted the quarantine are now starting to have upticks in numbers. And there are people who say that this is, proof. I don't like it that they use the word proof. It may well be evidence of something, but it's not proof. They claim that it's proof that what Brazil was doing wasn't working, because if defying this quarantine also accompanied not a lot of deaths, that would be evidence that the quarantine is perhaps a mistake, something that a lot of people want us to not think.
Yeah. Well, they want to continue this lockdown, and we'll go through the deck and you'll see how it's being managed here again versus managed elsewhere. And of course, look, at the end of the day, they just started testing in Brazil. They just started testing in Mexico. They just started testing in India, right? And I've been yelling about India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria for weeks, for 4 weeks now, and saying, I don't see the WHO in these countries. These numbers are, if this is a real global pandemic, these numbers are impossible. You can't have 20 people dead in a country the size of Nigeria with their healthcare system, right? So either the World Health Organization has done an amazing job and
I
showed
don't
up with
think
the
so.
C-130 transports, or they just haven't, they're just like not there. And
Now let's
that
put
scares the
this,
hell out of me.
yeah, let's
Yeah,
put
that
some
scares
of
the
this
hell out of me.
other relevant evidence together quickly for people who maybe haven't seen all the shows. A
Yeah.
viewer of Crowdsource the Truth, who will keep anonymous for now, shared this information with me, and Dr. Corsi gave us a really detailed breakdown of it in his show yesterday that people can still see. He's talking about how these Indian scientists have very precisely located these elements of glycoprotein from the HIV-1 virus, which coincidentally are patented. And one of the 4 patent holders is Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's quite strange, if you ask me. And when we look at that in the context of Dr. Fauci insisting that we shouldn't be doing tests of therapies like hydroxychloroquine, well, why would a doctor say that? Why would he not want an immediate and rapid double-blind study and clinical study of
I want to test my
a
understanding.
known drug that's been prescribed for
Yeah.
decades, that's well tolerated, that's well understood? Why wouldn't he aggressively pursue a clinical trial of that concurrent with any development of a vaccine? He seems adamant about not going the whatever it is, not using the
Yeah.
therapy. He wants to drive hard to the hoop for a vaccine without animal
Sure.
trials, not
Of course.
tested, not well
Of
understood,
course.
seems dangerous.
Of course. Of course they want a vaccine. That's where the money is. That's where the money is.
I
But
disagree that it's
I
about money only.
okay, hang on
This
though.
is
I want to
about
test my
control.
understanding of what am I looking at. I'm looking at
Right.
something I've never seen before, so I want to test my understanding. What are you showing me? I understand that Dr. Corsi confirmed this on your show yesterday, right? Dr. Corsi came on and he was validating this research, right?
Yes.
But can you help my audience may not have seen this. Can you kind of roll back 10,
Yes.
15 seconds and help everybody understand when you're talking about glycoproteins, this is how the virus connects to the human cell, right? That's the spike, so to speak. So
Well,
these guys are
what I want
patenting
to
the
do is,
spike.
first thing I got to do is I got to reiterate to everyone that Dr. Corsi is not a medical doctor. He's a PhD in political science, but he is a brilliant journalist and researcher, and he has been speaking with and interviewing many, many medical doctors. And what he has concluded is that this study done by people who are microbiologists and medical doctors has found these very distinctive genetic markers for the glycoprotein from HIV-1. And that particular glycoprotein called GP20 is patented, or I want to make sure I'm saying this correctly because this is a complicated subject and I'm also not a medical doctor. So if I'm saying something incorrectly, I'm open to certainly being corrected. But the basic premise is Dr. Fauci, who is well known for his AIDS research, and a lot of people have a lot of questions for Dr. Fauci about some of the things that he's done in this AIDS research. There is a patent that is held by he's listed as one of the inventors. Let's speak precisely. Here is the patent right here. We're going to take a look at it. So this is a patent specifically for the use of antagonists of the interaction between HIV GP120 and this A4B7 integrant. I have no idea what that means, but I do see Anthony S. Fauci right here of Washington, D.C. He's one of the inventors. The applicant for this is the United States of America, as represented by the Department of Health and Human Services, and they are also the assignee. They own this patent. So if someone wants to use this, they need to license the patent from them. So in other words, if this becomes a component of a vaccine or something like that, these guys own the patent. The point of the matter is this is a clearly defined genetic thing, and these scientists from India say they've found it in novel coronavirus 19. And that's very curious to know, given that Dr. Fauci is so against anything other than a vaccine against this thing.
Okay, so this, and I think, all right, so as soon as I hear that, to me, what that triggers, and it may trigger a different thought pattern for you and for the audience, but that takes me back to where we kind of started the story, which was in Winnipeg.
Right.
The Winnipeg lab is working with genetically manufactured HIV, coronavirus, et cetera, right? They're not going out into the wet markets and withdrawing coronavirus from bats. They're making it in the lab, right? So this takes us right back to the beginning of the story, which was last summer. This woman who is renowned, by the way, and so here's another huge irony. Remdesivir. Are you familiar with Remdesivir? It's another antiviral. Is now being talked about as a potential solution for this. She was one of the women, or one of the team, in fact, one of the key people, I believe, that developed Remdesivir, which is the antiviral that is used to cure Ebola. And it is incredibly effective against Ebola. And she was like a legend because of this Ebola vaccine, and was working in Winnipeg. And next thing you know, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police escort her, her husband, and a bunch of students out of the lab.
And she's been to Wuhan, China. She's going back and forth, training scientists over there.
That's her home base. That's her home lab, is Wuhan. So she's from the Wuhan lab, like on loan to Winnipeg, and has been working in Winnipeg. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police take her out of there with her husband and her students. So, and she's been making multiple trips back and forth. So whether it was intentional, whether it was accidental, whether it started out as accidental, and then what the heck, let's go to Walmart, cat's out of the bag, let's make the most of it. I don't know what's happening. I'm just looking at evidence. I see the woman in Walmart touching every computer. I see a woman from China working in a lab in Canada who's arrested by the police, escorted out, and no one wants to talk about that story anymore. Meaning, if you go back to the Canadian broadcast system and want to, follow up, they're telling you, oh, no, there's a whole conspiracy around this, and everybody thinks that she did it and she didn't do it. And it's like, okay, well, then what did she do? What did she have? Why did you arrest her? Was she smuggling, what? What was she smuggling? Was it dengue? What was it? What did she have?
Well, they said it was biological material and it was a violation of policy. So that's very vague. We don't really know.
Right. So when we look at all of that evidence and the way that, so what's interesting about the Winnipeg story is if you read the Winnipeg articles, and there's a bunch of articles from last summer, because it was before the outbreak of coronavirus.
Right.
These are kind of refreshingly real. Nobody knew what was about to happen.
Right.
So when you read these articles, especially now, you come away saying, all right, wouldn't this be sort of like a good place to begin the investigation to say, do we have evidence that that's not what happened here? Is that the case? And the Canadian authorities have not provided that evidence. They haven't told us what it was that she did do. We haven't heard that. And the same is true for that professor at Harvard, who similarly was arrested by the DOJ. And we've got documentation from the DOJ about that. again, with Chinese influence. So between what's happening in Winnipeg and what's happening in Harvard, again, I really don't feel like we're that far out on a limb asking just, can we peel the onion one layer deeper and find out, well, what happened? I
Yeah.
mean, what's the date on this? January what?
January
28th.
28th. And I mean, again, this is another story about an American professor who's got Chinese students. In this case, this is a document from the Department of Justice detailing the indictment of these individuals. It tells us that Yang Qing Yi, a 29-year-old Chinese national, was charged in an indictment, one count of visa fraud for making false statements. I believe this is one of the people who failed to declare that he or she was a lieutenant in the Chinese army. So
Dr.
that's an
Charles Lieber,
oversight.
excuse me, hold on, stop scrolling. Dr. Charles Lieber at Harvard University has received more than $15 million in grant funding from the National Institutes of Health and Department of Defense.
Sounds like bioweapon stuff, and he's got Chinese spies in his employ. It would be nice to know if these people that we're looking at and talking about could have possibly been involved in some sort of plan, could involve the Chinese government, maybe not.
So it's been 10 weeks. It's been 10 weeks since this happened. I haven't heard a story on CNN. I haven't heard a story on MSNBC about this. Have you? I haven't.
No.
I guess it's not important. I guess it's not important. So let's move on and let's go to my deck, because if it's not on MSNBC, it's not on CNN, it must not be important.
Right.
All right. So we're looking at we're looking at a heat map here, and this is the way they should have done the map, right? They should have set certain thresholds and said that if a certain percentage of the population is infected, it's going to be this color. And if a certain percentage of the population is infected, it'll be that color. And then you can change it down at the bottom and say, make it by percentage infected, make it by percentage dead, make it by what percentage of people died that were infected. Right? So if 1% of the people we know were infected died, or 4% or 3%, and let's use the coloring to figure out where we're having problems, when we're having problems. So what this is a map of the last N weeks. This is influenza season 2019-2020 as per the CDC. So the CDC, I just download the data and stick it in the spreadsheet. And this is by week. It begins in October. So week number 40 is the first week of October. And then it goes through. So week 52 is the last week of December. That's New Year's Eve week, right? So, and then week 1 is New Year's week. And right there you go. Exactly. So this is week by week, and the statistics are combining influenza and pneumonia-related death, right? So oftentimes the actual cause of death is pneumonia, but the pneumonia is brought on by the influenza. So they call it P&I, pneumonia and influenza-related death, and they add the two numbers together. So that's what we have on the far right. And this is when 2017, we've been talking about this a whole bunch, right? 2017, 61,000 people in America died from the influenza outbreak, and 10,000 were in Texas. 10,000 people died in Texas in 2017. So when I look at this is this season. And what I did was I color-coded in either kind of light red or dark red when we start having more than 4,000 people a week dying from influenza.
Wow.
Right. So
well,
if
and
it's light,
the purpose, of course, John, is that at a glance you can get a rough idea of what's going on rather than just a mess of red that tells you nothing.
exactly. So and that's the counterpoint. The counterpoint would be, what if I just colored the whole column red? What would that
Tells you
tell you?
nothing. Nothing.
Right. Right. So this is how it should be done, and this is called the heat map. And if you look at the bottom of the chart, you'll see that as of today, or as of a few hours ago, the influenza deaths, and this is just USA, so this is just the United States, roughly 105,000 people are dead from influenza, and about 34,000, a little more than that, from COVID. So that's where we stand right now. Now, again, 3 years ago, that number was 61,000. And the biggest number that I can find in history since the Spanish flu is 1968. 1968 was the Hong Kong flu outbreak. And I think that the numbers will bear out that about 100,000 people died in the United States in 1968 from the Hong Kong flu. This is the most since the Spanish flu that I can find. I could be wrong, and if somebody in the audience can show us a year where we had more than 1968, I would love to hear it. I could absolutely stand corrected. Absolutely could stand corrected. But right now, I can't find a year with more than 1968. So this is now the most people that have ever died since the Spanish flu in 1918, best I can tell.
It's pretty interesting that we had all that flu death in 1968. What a tumultuous year. The murder of Robert Kennedy, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. Lyndon Johnson was the president. Don't trust that guy at all. But that's a different story. So, okay.
So let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide because we want to wrap the show up in a reasonable amount of time tonight.
Yeah.
All right. So this is interesting. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that China has revised its reporting.
Yeah.
So
which
China
basically instructs us that we should throw away any information from China, because if they can just revise it all of a sudden, then that's them telling us what they had before was totally false. Why should we trust this now?
But I think it also opens the door, or it reopens the door. So in other words, let's ask the Wall Street Journal. So the Wall Street Journal gets this update from China about Wuhan, right? And that the numbers in Wuhan were off by 50%. It wasn't 3,200, it's 4,500. Okay, that's the net. But where is the Wall Street Journal asking about the cities that we've heard of, like Hong Kong and Shanghai and Beijing? And are they off by 50%? Is that an unreasonable question to ask? Is Hong Kong, with 4 people dead, is that also off by 50%? Should we mark that up to 6? Shanghai was 7 dead. Is that also off by 50? Should we knock that up to 10 people? Is that correct, President Xi? Right? So I want to use the data to hold President Xi's feet to the fire and say either the data is remarkable or it's wrong. I mean, there's 4 people dead in Hong Kong. And if it's wrong, is anybody going to pay attention to that? I mean, why is the Wall Street Journal so fascinated with Wuhan? They've never heard of Shanghai. They've never heard of Beijing. They're not interested in poor reporting out of the biggest cities in China.
I would argue that the Wall Street Journal is very interested in poor reporting. This is the same news outlet that published definite lies that were contradicted by emails that Charles Ortel had when they were reporting on the death of Peter Smith. Shane Harris published things that were directly contradicted posthumously by Peter W. Smith in private emails to Charles Ortel that Shane Harris was unaware of. And when I confronted Shane Harris about this to ask him how he got that information and arrived at those conclusions, he refused to discuss it. I also want to remind people, I did a video earlier today. The Wall Street Journal is owned by News Corp, which also owns the New York Post and Fox News. And by branding these things differently, maybe they started out as separate papers and got purchased by News Corp. That's very likely. But we now have this sort of group that can create a false consensus. If they arrive at a conclusion, they can disseminate it through 3 channels that the uninitiated will see as 3 separate opinions corroborating each other. That's a social engineering tactic.
Well, we see that. I mean, it's not just News Corp. I mean, that's Disney.
Everybody. Yes.
That's yeah. So, I mean, how many players are there? I mean, this is what George Carlin said. You know, it's the illusion of choice.
Right.
right? We have the illusion of choice, right? There's 97 different boxes of cereal and two political parties,
Right.
right? Right? Prego, right? There's 40 different ways you can buy Prego sauce, right? With mushrooms, with vegetables, without, with this, with that, and two political parties.
No, they're sold out
Right?
of sauce, John. You got to come
Yeah,
back
well,
tomorrow.
that's true too. Yeah, it's the illusion of choice, according to
You're not
George
allowed to
Carlin.
buy
Rest in
more than
peace.
one sauce.
That's true too. All right, let's go to the next slide, if you would. All right, so this is the Phil Haney thing. So as I was looking at all these other countries and archiving footage, I get to India, and I see this footage in India, and maybe we'll pull something up on YouTube. Maybe you can get one of the Indian TV news stations reporting on the Tablighi Jamaat arrests, because this is big. So for the audience that hasn't been listening in the past, or just kind of joining us recently, Phil Haney was a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security, and he was investigating a network of funding and enabling of terrorist type activities like the Pensacola shooting, as an example. He didn't necessarily connect the two, but I'm going to use that as just an example of an event that was carried out by Al Qaeda that may have had local support in the Pensacola area, right? So we had a Pensacola shooter. Al Qaeda takes credit. Did this guy have support at the local mosque, at the local coffee shops, right? Is there a community of Al Qaeda supporting these guys before they pull the trigger? And that's what Phil was investigating, and Phil's written a book about it. Phil testified in front of Congress, and then Phil was killed. I think it was in January 20th, I think. I could be wrong.
That's
But Phil
remarkably
was
close
murdered.
to the timing of the outbreak when we look at it in retrospect.
Exactly. So Phil was killed. Yeah, there's his book. Exactly. And he was getting ready to publish another book. And I think that's what may have triggered his murder, is might he have been on to the desire, the ability, the willingness to use a biological mechanism to spread fear. Because when we go look at the news stories coming out of India, it appears that the spread of this virus in India, 80%, approximately, or at least that's my perspective having watched a couple of these, 80% of the cases in India are being linked to one Tablighi Jamaat event. And 80% of the cases in India are being linked to that event. So why don't we run this and see what she has to say?
Oh, well, we're on YouTube, so we could get dinged for running it. And as we've been telling people, normally John and I are doing our show as a sponsor exclusive on Subscribestar and Patreon, but we can make commentary on this video as part of our fair use, but it's possible that this video will be removed if we show too much.
All right, but you guys get the gist of it. So Maulana Assad is the head of Al Qaeda in India, which is called effectively Tablighi Jamaat, right? And if you remember the Sri Lanka bombing was exceptionally brutal, and the Tablighi Jamaat was behind that. And I mean, the Sri Lankan bombing, when the police went to the house of the guy who was behind it in Sri Lanka, the guy's wife blew herself up with the kids and took out a whole bunch of cops.
Wow.
I mean, these are ruthless people, ruthless killers. And you dig into that Sri Lankan bombing story, and then the aftermath when the cops went to the guy's house and how the wife blows herself up and the kids. It's just brutal. It's just brutal. So this is a rough organization. That's it. That's the event. So they have this event that takes place, and they're tracing something like 80% of the cases back to this event. They issued an all points bulletin. They wanted this guy and they got him. So the head of Al Qaeda in India has been arrested in the last 24 hours. And yeah,
1,023 cases across 17 states believed to have spread by infected foreign attendees. So this is basically corroborating David Hawkins' essential theory, which is that agents who are biological spreaders of this viral contagion have deliberately placed it in strategic locations.
look at the last sentence on the page. Read that. The police, I think you scroll past it, go back up a smidge. The police say the Tablighi Jamaat gathering in Delhi's Nizamuddin area, which began on March 3rd, was not ended even when India announced the lockdown on March 24th. So these guys were huddling and doing whatever they're doing March 3rd. Now we're at April 17?
Yeah.
All right, so they've had a 6-week running start in India. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, they've infected a lot of people. I think many people will get sick. But again, it's strange to me because we're talking November, December that the outbreak began in China. India is way closer to China than Italy is or New York is. Why wasn't India some kind of epicenter?
Can you find India on the map and click on the red dot? Can you see
India,
the
I
red
can
dot?
find. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you for that.
there you go. Trying to be
So,
kind.
486 deaths. I mean, aren't there like 1 billion people in India? That seems like a remarkably small number, particularly given its proximity to China.
Yeah, India's population is only 40 million people less than China. So China's 1.4 billion, India's 1.36. So they're almost identical, right? So 1.36 billion people in India, and it appears that there's fewer people dead in India than Nassau County, New York, Long
Exactly.
Island.
And when you're
All right,
talking
so
about 400 out of 1 billion, that is just almost incalculable. It's like a margin of error.
All right, so the question then becomes, so, and I would pose these questions to Dr. Tedros. I would pose these questions to Dr. Fauci. Is that true? Like, are these numbers real, or are people dying in India, but they're just not getting tested? So there's plenty of people already dead, and there will be more dead, but we just don't know if it's COVID. But again, I kind of come back to, where is the World Health Organization? I thought that when the United States and Canada and France and Switzerland and England, when we give these guys money, I thought it's so that they go to Bangladesh and Laos and Cambodia when things get tough. I thought that's what they did. I could be wrong.
It has
There could be my
world
mistake.
in the name, John, and the idea is to prevent a worldwide pandemic. So it seems like they would
I could be
need
wrong.
to go there.
Maybe the Red Cross is the organization that should be running. I don't have all the answers. I just keep looking at this evidence, and I have to ask Dr. Tedros, did you already arrive in India and put this virus down? And what we're seeing on the map is the effect of just a remarkable World Health Organization reaction, or are you not paying attention?
Or is he deliberately doing something?
But Jason, based on the virulence that you're seeing, the numbers that are being reported in New York and New Jersey, in Louisiana, in Michigan, there is a certain virulent strain. Now, I don't know if we're seeing the same kind of virulence in California. Again, I can't explain all this stuff. We know there's multiple strains, right? Remember, we talked a couple weeks ago about how Iceland had already sequenced 30 different strains of it. They already were able to identify 30 different variations in it in Iceland.
That's unbelievable. And the question that I have for a virologist is, how quickly does a virus normally mutate into these other strains? I haven't been able to get an answer, but 30 in a short time when this thing was just, they say they didn't know about it in November or October, and now there's 30 different versions. I mean, that sounds very fast to me.
Well, also, it's the irony that this tiny little island, Iceland, has as many people dead as Shanghai with 24.5 million people. Really? So again, is President Xi lying? Is it accurate? And that's true. I don't have the answers to that, but again, my issue is that CNN and they're just not asking these questions. These are the right questions to be asked. I mean, how controversial is it to ask
Now, wait a minute.
when we're
Look at
talking about
this.
Wuhan? Yeah,
Isn't this
our,
the news agency that's owned by Al Walid? I want to double check that, but he owns
I
a news,
believe,
Al Arabia.
I believe, yeah, I believe, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so
I
here,
think, I think you're right.
this is reporting. See, I'm very interested in finding out where these reports come from because it seems to me that social engineers, whether they're billionaires like Bill Gates and Rupert Murdoch and Jeff Bezos, or losers like the people that we deal with online, they have a technique. They want to control the message. So, in the case of rich psychopaths, they purchase newspapers, they purchase television stations. And John, this is a big reason why we've created our show in the format that we have. Because if some big billionaire came in here and was funding this operation, we'd obviously be answering to the concerns of the billionaire, to the concerns of the corporate sponsor, by having the individual viewers sponsor the show for extremely low amounts, $2 a month, something like this. We can eliminate any undue financial influence. So my question for Al Arabia, I would run this story down and I'd want to find out where they got the facts from. Because when I've been doing that with the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, they don't have very good answers. And people who watch Crowdsource the Truth have experienced that for themselves.
Yeah, the mutation issue is, clearly a big issue. I think, in fact, Dr. Fauci brought it up and said it's going to make the vaccine a little trickier. And I think he spells trickier, more expensive. I
Yeah.
think that's how he spells it. I think that's how he spells it. So again,
Evidence
I
that
think
the
that this the
coronavirus.
whole thing about the vaccine is, to me, that looks like a money play. The power play, the control play that has me very upset is this notion I'm hearing out of Governor Cuomo, where you have to be tested and
To go
prove
back
you
to
don't
work.
have the virus to go back to work. I
Right.
mean, that sounds like a science fiction movie. It's like Logan's Run Part Two.
It's what David
You've got
Icke would call the totalitarian tiptoe. They start out by scaring everybody into thinking that, if you walk outside in New York City right now without a mask on, as long as you're 6 feet away from everybody, you're in compliance with the recommendations or the orders or whatever. I don't know what the difference is between an order from the governor and the law, but it seems vague. And people are looking at you cross-eyed if you don't have the mask on. So this is the tiptoe. The next step is we've got a consensus among the stink eye people that if you haven't been vaccinated, we don't want to be around you. So yeah, let's get on board with forcing people to be vaccinated. And Bill Gates has the wonderful idea that if you insert an RFID chip in your hand that can record if you've been vaccinated or not, this is a great way for him to assure the other people around you that you're not sick. And, the next step, of course, that we've discussed is that without this chip, perhaps Governor Cuomo won't allow you to return to work, or maybe that's illegal for the governor to do, but perhaps a private company could make it their policy that they don't want you around. And if everybody starts doing this, maybe you can't get a job if you don't have this chip. Maybe American Airlines and United Airlines don't want you on their plane if you don't have this chip. Maybe you can't buy anything from Amazon.com or Whole Foods, or who knows?
Again, what we're starting to see in China is social scoring,
Right.
where if you're a rabble rouser, you may not be able to get a seat on an airplane,
They can record that in the
right?
chip.
Oh, of course. And if they use blockchain, right? So if they use blockchain, which is
It's
what I
never
would use,
going
right?
away.
Well, and it's almost, if you use blockchain, it's recorded everywhere. So basically, every chip or all the data is everywhere. It's, that would be the way to do it. But it's scary. This is science fiction stuff. I mean, this is the stuff we grew up watching in the movies, that, these were the invasions in personal freedoms and privacies, that it was science fiction. And now these guys, because they can, think it's a good idea. And just because you can doesn't necessarily make it a good idea, right?
Right.
So,
Well, it's not just science fiction. This was written about by Zbigniew Brzezinski. What was his book about technocracy? The future or something? What did he say? The world ahead or something like that?
yeah, yeah. I'm not familiar with his book, but I'm
Technocratic
familiar with what he
era.
did in
Between Two
Afghanistan.
Ages is the Zbigniew Brzezinski book. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is a guy who was hanging out with, what's his name? The guy with the petrodollar, who's everybody's favorite consultant, Kissinger. He was good friends with Zbigniew Brzezinski. It's always interesting when these books are super expensive. They don't necessarily make it that easy for you to read it, but this is America's role in the technocratic era. It's remarkably similar, kind of, to the Project for a New American Century, which in retrospect seems prophetic. It called for an event like a modern Pearl Harbor to galvanize people so that we could introduce the Patriot Act, etc. But what we're looking at now is whatever happened with COVID-19, everybody sitting in their houses has been psychologically traumatized, caused to believe that if they go outside, they might get a deadly viral infection. They haven't worked for a month and a half. They've been crawling up the walls, probably getting on each other's nerves, hanging out in close quarters. You can't go out. You can't see your friends. You can't go to a restaurant. You can't go to the movies. Everybody's going broke. It's ridiculous.
And the question is this a reasonable response for a respiratory viral infection? Is what we're seeing, the way the government is responding, is it consistent with what you would expect, given that we've got 105,000 people dead from influenza, and we're going absolutely kind of, I don't know, what kind of bonkers over 35,000 with COVID? We're, bringing out the National Guard.
Well, the bigger issue, John, is that they're doing this in anticipation of projections made by people who now we have enough perspective to know that those projections were totally wrong. Just this morning, Andrew Cuomo gave a press conference where he is reinforcing the false belief that the numbers were right, but that the response was so great that now everything is much lower. In my mind, that's an inaccurate conclusion, or at very least, it's an unproven conclusion, because it seems equally likely that the initial projection was totally wrong.
Andrew Cuomo has more people dead in New York than the entire country of China.
What a great job.
India. So, as far as him doling out advice, he needs to be picking up the phone. He needs to be talking to somebody on Prime Minister Abe's staff, or somebody in South Korea, or, pick a country, New Zealand. I don't care. Pick a country that has done a reasonable job of suppressing this thing, and find out what are the best practices. Talk to 2 or 3 countries. What are the best practices? And then let's look at our plan. Let's revise our plan accordingly based on what's working in Germany, what's working in New Zealand, right? There are other countries that appear to be doing a better job. And again, I'm just looking at the map. That's how I'm telling you this. I'm just looking at the data, right? I'm looking at the percentage of people sick versus the percentage of people dying. Germany is outpacing everybody. New Zealand is outpacing everybody. And then we get to these countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, that have no cases. And so it begs the question, do they have no cases? Do they have no cases because the World Health Organization hasn't shown up and hasn't started testing anybody, and we should get ready for an absolute unbelievable outbreak in Laos and Cambodia, right, in Vietnam? Or has their use of prophylactic anti-malarial drugs kept the virus at bay because they take anti-malarial medications to prevent malaria?
Well, there's
And
a
if
third
they've been taking,
possibility. Do they not have
oh, there's,
Walmarts with potential agents spreading infection? Here's an interesting piece of information coming to us from the comments on YouTube. Grateful Heretic says that Whole Foods is the only market this person can find that actually has organic produce in stock. All the other supermarkets are looking very, very empty, and what they have is scary looking. Hashtag monopoly. We know that Jeff Bezos, in the creation of Amazon, you can see it walking around New York City, has had a major, major impact on retail here in New York City. The rising cost of rent, the easy availability of virtually any product from Amazon.com. Radio Shack is totally out of business. If you need a DC to DC converter, if you need a resistor, one little $2 thing, you can't get that anymore. I can't tell you how many times I went down to Radio Shack and fixed some computer component with a surface mount thing. Can't do that anymore. And now they've bought Whole Foods, and here we have someone who is observing in their location that the other stores, all these organic farmers want to do business with Whole Foods, so they say, forget about you other stores.
All right, so let's go to root cause analysis. Why does this
sorry.
happen?
One more important thing we got to address, because Boomy54 brings up a good point. All the info is crap. What I wanted to get to in the beginning of the show was that John and I review this info not because we think it's correct, not because we think it's accurate, but because this is the information that people like Anthony Fauci and Andrew Cuomo are referring to and basing their response on. So we're questioning them based on this, not based on what we actually think is happening, based on what they say is happening.
This is what they're reporting. So if they're telling us this is the story, I'm going to hold them accountable to this information. And if the to your viewer's point, if the information is terrible, if it's bad, well, then how have they been making decisions based on this bad data? That's like being in an airplane and all the instruments are broken.
Yeah.
Well, how are you flying it then? How are you operating? If everything here is bad and all this data is lousy, how are they making any decisions about anything?
Which essentially was just admitted by China. They say, oh, we were off by 50%. It's like, whoa, wait a minute.
And so the follow-up question from the Wall Street Journal should be, were you off by 50% in Hong Kong and Beijing and Shanghai?
I disagree.
Why is that so,
the follow-up
why
question
is that so
should be, if you're so off the mark, why should we believe any of your data at all? It's not like it was 2%.
No, because nobody has mentioned Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing pointedly. The point is, if we're off by 4% in Wuhan, does that mean Hong Kong is actually 6 and not 4? That Shanghai is actually 10 and not 7? That Beijing is really 12 and not 8? Do you see how absurd that is?
Let me ask you this, John.
Absurd. It's absurd.
So if people trust Reuters, and Reuters is reporting that India is charging these, Tablighi Jamaat chief with homicide, that means they've done an investigation and they've determined that this guy has deliberately infected people. Homicide is murder.
Culpable homicide. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. This is a big story. This is like the head of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula being captured. This is a big deal. This guy is a big character and he's the head of the Tablighi Jamaat. And they got him. Him. And Phil Haney, I got news for you. Phil Haney, this is what Phil Haney worked for. That this guy got captured.
Right. Well, the question that I have is, if we have an authority saying that Tablighi Jamaat is guilty of homicide by deliberately infecting people with COVID-19,
Right.
do we have a similar investigation coming in the United States? And will we start to determine that there are other people who perhaps knew about this and held
Fantastic.
key
Great
patents
question.
in genetic research that seem to be linked to this and own companies that are rapidly developing vaccines and recommending ways to track the population? I think that these are people of interest. I think we have found enough evidence to impanel a grand jury and ask these questions. I'm not saying these guys are guilty. I'm saying, where is the grand jury? Why is Bill Gates on TV rather than watching a TV in an orange jumpsuit in a rec room somewhere?
Well, it could be that, like me, Durham or Horowitz loves an unfair fight. Right? I like an unfair fight. I like to come to the table with so much evidence they can't even counter. It's just absurd, right?
Yeah, but the
If
problem
I
is
can
those
bring,
two guys are not going to do anything. The guy that we need to come to the table with sufficient information to make sure that it's an unfair fight, he seems to look at information like this and decide there's nothing there and close the investigations down. There's one guy that we need to start these investigations, and he's still talking about, you know, stuff from
so
3 scandals ago.
that takes us to, is he actually preoccupied with something else that he's not telling us about? And that takes us back to our friend Shepard Ambellis and 2 weeks ago, and what Shepard introduced on the show 2 weeks ago, that, again, quite frankly, my own biases kept it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's going here. And here I am 2 weeks later saying, holy mackerel, was Shepard Ambellis the friggin' Jeff Goldblum of our day? And I'm talking about Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day, the movie.
Right, not just
Jeff
the haircut. You're talking
Yeah,
about
Jeff
the information he brought forward about near-Earth objects. And it sounded ridiculous. Shepard and I did a whole show about this because he gave actually a very good explanation on his website, intellihub.com. Planet X was named by astronomers, not B-movie directors, and the X stands for the number 10. It was thought to be the 10th planet in our solar system on such a huge orbit that it only came in close enough proximity to Earth to be seen or detected every 3,000 some odd years, and he's saying that it's about to come back.
Well, as a result of Shepard Ambellis bringing this information to the table, that, again, admittedly, my bias was a bit reluctant, but because of Shepard's background and his history of uncovering just fascinating stuff that at first glance often seems hard to believe, right? I said, well, I'm going to dig into it anyway. I'm going to see what's out there. And lo and behold, oh my God, these near-Earth objects, it seems they're everywhere. So
yeah.
One of the
people
big
can go back
questions
and look
is,
at those. Yeah, what were we going to say the question is?
yeah, well, I mean, the question is, are we just now aware of them? And these things have been whizzing by the Earth forever, right? We know they've been whizzing by the Earth forever, right? And now we're aware of them. Now we're actually looking, and now we see them.
Right.
And so now we're kind of freaking out. It's like, oh, we got new headlights on the car. Now we can see where we're going.
Yeah.
And so
people
if
can get all
that's
those
what
details looking at the previous shows we did with Shepard and looking at that show that I just did with Shepard. But you've raised an interesting point in our offline conversations, John, that given all the facts and data that you and I have been reviewing for the last hour and 15 minutes, is the response that we're seeing an appropriate response to what seems like, as President Trump said at the beginning of this, really not that much different than Ebola, H1N1. Obviously, it's serious. There's loss of life. But in other words, we didn't shut down the country for those other things. And there's been a series of reporting here in Newsweek, which I don't typically rely on for information, but it should be evaluated. Tell us what you think about this, John.
This validates so much of what Shepard Ambellis told us that I really feel like I need to read a couple of excerpts from this to the audience because
Sure.
this is stunning information. And quite frankly, this was the reason I think Jason and I both felt that we needed to do this show tonight on YouTube and not go to the Patreon only hour was because of this story. So Shepard Ambellis came on the show, starts talking about, and I love Shepard. I think you love Shepard. I think a lot of the audience loves Shepard.
Great guy.
But yeah, he's awesome. And again, like I told you when we first had him on, Shepard put me on the map, right? You and Shepard, without the two of you guys, I'd have no subscribers, no viewers, or any of that. You two put my work on the map. And he comes to the table and starts talking about the Blue Kachina and Planet X. And I'm just like, what the hell is he talking about? And
somebody take the vape from him.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, there goes my audience, there goes all my credibility, right? So, but sure enough, I kind of put my bias in check, and I said, all right, that's damn, it's like, have you ever heard Steven Tyler talk about Joe Perry? Steven Tyler talks about Joe Perry like he's like Joe Perry's a really good guitar player. Steven Tyler talks about Joe Perry, like he's Jimmy Page, and Joe Perry is no Jimmy Page, right? But I feel that way about Shepard Ambellis. To me, Shepard Ambellis in this research stuff is just an absolute rock star. He finds amazing stuff. And when he came to us and said they've been mobilizing, and you and I are like, where? What the hell are you talking about? You're showing me a video of a bunch of tanks on the railroad tracks. When did that come from? That could be 1987 for all we know.
Right.
So.
Oh, John, you froze. Oh, man. So we've been having this. Hang on one second. We're going to recover it here. So I've got a method now for recovering from this. Stand by, John. John, I think you can probably still hear us. Okay. Yes. So just stand by. We're going to need to do a quick restart here to get this back to the way we want it. And we're going to continue with the show. So don't go anywhere. People can't hear you very well, but there does seem to be perhaps a bug in the system that causes a crash on Skype. I don't know. A lot of people are going to presume that it's outside interference. Sorry, what's that?
Standing by.
Yeah. Okay, so you can keep talking. People can hear you in a reduced audio quality while we restart.
Okay. All right, so this article was reported by Newsweek. And this Newsweek article, let me just start by reading it, and let's just see where we go with it. District of Columbia Mayor, so Washington, D.C. Mayor, Muriel Bowser yesterday ordered a 1-month extension of the state of emergency as cases in the region grow at a rapid pace. Federal officials in the nation's capital expect a New York-like epidemic in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, one that could potentially cripple the government. No one wants to talk evacuation, says a senior military officer working on continuity of government planning. That's exactly what Shepard said.
Absolutely. Now, John, stand by. I'm going to bring you back here. So just bear with me for 1 second, okay?
Should I keep going?
No, stop for just a second. We're going to bring you back in full audio quality. Stand by.
I got you. Okay.
Okay, so sorry about that, everybody. It's sometimes a little tricky to keep everything going, but luckily we've got a contingency here, and John will be back with us in just a moment. I see what happened. Okay, I know how I can repair that for future shows. Yeah, answer that. Okay, now we've got you back, John. Yeah.
Is that good?
That is good. Please continue.
All righty. Wow, that was smooth.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
So now I have an idea for how to make it even better.
Here we go. All right. Let's see what we've got here. A little-known military task force charged with evacuating Washington has already been activated. A task force charged with the most sensitive government mission of securing Washington in the face of attackers, foreign and domestic, and if necessary, moving White House and other key government offices to alternate locations. And again, I'm reading this Newsweek article, and I encourage the audience to read this later yourselves. Activated on March 16th, a month ago, the Joint Task Force National Capital Region, which is called the JTF-NCR, is chartered to defend Washington on land, in the air, and even on the waterfronts. Okay, let's keep going.
Yep.
I'm going to go down. Most immediate, the JTF-NCR is charged with facilitating continuity of government, particularly moving civil and military leaders to secret locations for the order given to evacuate the city. Ever since National Guard started to activate countrywide, Pentagon officials have insisted that men and women in uniform are not conducting secret missions and that they will not administer or enforce stay-at-home quarantines. The Pentagon has also rejected reports, including articles in Newsweek, about martial law or other extreme contingency plans, arguing that the Guard remains under strict control of state governors, while federal troops support civil agencies like FEMA. And yet,
yeah.
and, and
I don't know
yet
if
the
that sounds very
activation,
good, though.
well, exactly. And yet the activation of Joint Task Force National Capital Region, including almost 10,000 uniformed personnel to carry out its special orders, contradicts those assurances. JTF-NCR is not only real and operating, reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense for some of its mission, but some of its units are already on 24/7 alert, specially sequestered on military bases and kept out of coronavirus support duties to ensure their readiness. Let's keep going. This is getting interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A little further. Okay, on March 12th, families and friends gathered at Decatur, Illinois National Guard Armory to say goodbye. They're shipping out. All anyone would say was that two Black Hawk helicopter companies of the 106th Aviation Battalion, whoop, you scroll past what I was reading.
Sorry.
That's okay. 106th Aviation Battalion were headed to Fort Belvoir in the Northern Virginia suburbs of Washington. There, something big was a special assignment in support of Joint Task Force National Capital Region. Okay, so these guys are shipping out. Unlike other guardsmen activated under Title 32, under gubernatorial control but paid for by the federal government, the soldiers of the 106th were activated under Title 10 orders. This is different. Strict federal duty, as if they're going to Afghanistan or Iraq, except in this case, the battlefield is Washington, D.C. On that battlefield, the Illinois 106th Aviation Battalion's helicopters would be used to evacuate everyone from Army leaders to the White House. We are that quick reaction force that allows us to help mobilize forces within the Washington, D.C. area, evacuate people or whatever that might be, says Captain Adam Kowalski of the Illinois Guard. We're kind of like that big taxi cab that makes sure everybody gets where they need to be and keeps the government going. He and his fellow officers have been studying the Joint Emergency Evacuation Plan, JEEP, the national plan to move Defense Department officials to alternative locations outside the Washington area.
I got to pause you for a second, John, because "we're that big taxi cab" is just about the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody in the Army say, and I've heard them say some stupid things. I also want to point out that Jamie is joining us in the YouTube comments, and in all caps, Jamie tells us that Trump has said that the ships and the Javits Center are supposed to be COVID-free. I'm not sure if that's still the case. I know at one point I think they were talking about that, but you will recall that before there were even 100 people on that USNS Comfort, They had inadvertently brought a coronavirus patient there, and then Governor
Mm,
Cuomo implored President Trump to allow them to use the ship for coronavirus, and President Trump
right,
did. Uh,
right.
it's very weird.
Well, what I find weird is that they brought that ship from, I think it was in Los Angeles. I think it was in,
No, no, no. I think it was in Norfolk, Virginia. There's one that went
oh, I
to
thought,
Los
okay,
Angeles. There's
okay,
the
all right.
Comfort and the Mercy. The Mercy is in Los Angeles. I'm pretty sure because if you remember, the president went there to see it off, so he wouldn't go to
Yeah.
L.A. He just went to Virginia from D.C.
All right. The net of it is they brought the boats in and didn't put coronavirus people on the boats. And it's like, well, what the hell are you bringing the boats in for if you're not going to put coronavirus people on the boats? What are you doing?
Well,
And
they said it was
here,
going to be to
again,
help people who needed non-coronavirus hospitals, but
right,
that got screwed up right away.
right, right. All right. Well, this is what Shepard was trying to say without having the specifics. And Newsweek went out and got the specifics basically behind what Shepard was trying to tell us.
Hmm.
He and his fellow officers have been studying the Joint Emergency Evacuation Plan, the national plan to move Defense Department officials to alternative locations. Now, what I find strange is moving people around to alternative locations. I mean, so what we're saying is certain areas are less viral. We're going to run away from the virus, but there's less virus in Virginia than in. I'm unclear on that part, but let's just keep going.
Isn't it
The
also
next
interesting
sentence.
that they're moving the same officials who were giving $15 million to Charles Lieber?
Yeah, and now where do you see the next sentence? Jeep is not the only plan. It is supplemented by
Yeah,
Atlas.
yeah. Isn't that the
Atlas.
satellite that was shooting things at comets?
Atlas is the near Earth object, tungsten rod railgun thing that we were talking about, and the observation and detection. So it's a combination of all that stuff. DART. DART was the thing that moves it. Atlas is the program to find the near Earth objects, I believe. DART was the thing that, yeah, that hits them. And yeah. So they bring up Atlas, and Atlas is in here in this document.
I'm not sure it's the
Highly
same thing, but
classified.
it's interesting.
I don't either. Okay, but keep going. Highly classified Octagon, Freejack, and Zodiac plans that deal with other emergencies. You ever hear of Octagon, Freejack, and Zodiac? That's a Kevin Ship question right there.
Never heard of that.
Octagon, Freejack, and Zodiac. Kevin, if you're watching, we need to know what that's all about. Plans that deal with other emergencies and the movement of the White House and other presidential successors. The March 16th order that activated JTF-NCR placed all this planning, here we go, under the command of Major General Omar Jones IV. In peacetime, the Army Major General commands the Military District of Washington, an Army unit known mostly for ceremonial memorial expertise, providing the soldiers at Arlington, drum and fife, etc., etc., etc. There was not even a single military interface in the White House when no interagency stuff during 9/11. So they named this guy that would be the guy. And let's keep going. Scroll down. Yeah, underneath the
Oh, there
picture,
he
that's
is.
him. Yep. So that's Omar Jones. In peacetime, the Joint Forces headquarters is merely a coordinator with each of the military services retaining control. But once the Joint Task Force is activated, as it has been now, Shepard, operations and units shift to what the military calls operational command. Major General Jones is now in charge. He isn't some martial law commander who takes precedence over civil authorities, nor is he out in public telling anyone outside his secretive task force what to do, but he is the military man who would be in charge in Washington if civil government broke down. General Jones's battlefield is defined in U.S. law as the National Capital Region, which includes the District of Columbia, Prince George and Montgomery counties in Maryland, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William counties in Virginia, all cities and towns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Pentagon plan for the Joint Task Force operations says that the NCR houses, listen to this, all three branches of the federal government.
Mm.
Let me repeat that. The Pentagon plan for the Joint Task Force operation says that the NCR houses all three branches of the federal government, over 270 federal departments and agencies, an inventory of over 880 government-owned and leased facilities, and nearly 300,000 federal workers. It's perhaps one of the most sensitive jobs in the military, dealing with 3 civil governments, all of whom, including the District of Columbia, have their own National Guards and their own responsibilities. The NCR also houses the White House and its 2 quasi-military controllers, the White House Military Office and the Secret Service. And it houses the FBI. Ha ha ha.
Hmm.
You get that? General
Well,
Omar has jurisdiction over the FBI. I'm going to repeat that. General Omar now has jurisdiction over the FBI.
is that a
And we're
good
going to
thing or a
continue.
bad thing?
It's a different thing. It's different than anything anybody is aware of until now. Until they read this Newsweek article, who's reporting this? Why doesn't CNN report the news anymore? Because Zucker's obsessed with impeaching the president, so they just don't do news, right? MSNBC doesn't do news, and that's Bill Gates, right? That's Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
They don't report this. All right, so let's keep going because this is kind of heavy. So Omar, whoa, we're back on FBI. Back up. Okay, it houses the FBI and various other federal police forces, such as the U.S. Capitol Police.
Yeah.
Each of which has its own jurisdictions and
And
emergency
likes to give
responsibilities.
evidence to the defense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it also now controls the skies over Washington, Operation Noble Eagle. It is the longest running operation since September 11th, keeping fighter jets within range of Washington airspace on alert, ready to take off within minutes. Kept in near isolation, Bloomberg reported yesterday. Let's scroll down a little bit more. To practice this fail-safe mission, less than a week after the Illinois 106th Battalion was mustered, exercise Falcon Virgo commenced in the skies
wait a minute now.
over.
Amalgam Virgo was an exercise that was happening right before 9/11. Are you familiar with that, John?
No.
Oh boy.
But Falcon, let's not get sidetracked. Falcon
No, this
Virgo
is not a sidetrack. This is very important. If you're not aware of this, you need to see this. So Amalgam Virgo was a military readiness exercise. Look at the document and look at the date and look at who's on it.
Okay, well, we knew. So I was reading some of the books between September 11th and 1993. I mean, there was so much material that you could study. And this probably talks about the Bojinka plot, right? They were talking about using airliners and blowing up a whole bunch of them over the Pacific. And that was something the CIA was aware of.
Operation Northwoods was that. But anyway, let's carry on because we're getting long in the tooth here in terms of the runtime. All
right, so go past Falcon Virgo. Let's keep going. But we get to NORAD. All right, so the notion here is that air defense now. They talk about the facilities. There's talking about the air defense in the nation's capital is directed from a 22,000 square foot 2-story blockhouse called the Joint Air Defense Operations Center at Bolling Air Force Base. Built to oversee 24/7 operation, interceptor aircraft, surface-to-air missiles. It seems a little heavy-handed for a respiratory infection.
For a virus, yeah.
A little bit, but let's keep going. Scroll down.
I mean, I guess the concern is that in a weakened posture, terrorists could attack, so they want all this in place.
I guess so. So keep going. According to Northcom Joint Task Force, as immediately required to save lives, prevent human suffering, or mitigate great property damage, a senior retired Northcom commander says, reciting JTF NCR's orders. That's the language that endows the JTF commander to have to act, even if he's not formally directed to. Anyone who says otherwise is playing with the truth. In other words, JTF NCR supports can you scroll up a little bit? Coronavirus response. No, the other way. Scroll, normal scroll. There you go. In other words, JTF-NCR supports coronavirus response efforts in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, guards Washington from a terrorist attack, prepares for the worst, even taking unilateral action to carry out its orders. To conduct his multiple missions, Major General Jones has a force of 10,000, doing everything from Washington's airspace to standing by for emergency bomb disposal, staying ready to carry out law enforcement duties should there be a greater catastrophe and need for military intervention. His largest unit, the 3rd Infantry Regiment, also known as the Old Guard, normally supplies the Spitshine Guards at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and conduct the public events. But with activation, they've been given responsibility to conduct homeland defense and civil support operations. He can also call on a dozen or more specialized units, all allocated for DC area duties. The Marine Corps Chemical, Biological, Incident Response Force, a specialized unit able to provide swift and robust support to the White House. It's getting heavy. Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep scrolling. The Army Special Reaction Team, a sort of super SWAT team.
Yeah, then the NYPD has been using these special reaction teams as well, and they don't want to talk to me about what's going on, which is understandable, but there have been no regular NYPD around. It's all these counterterrorism or traffic cops.
Right. Army Aviation Brigade, including the 12th Aviation Battalion, including HMX-1, a large Marine Corps unit that provides the Marine One helicopter and the 1st Helicopter Squadron, a technical rescue unit, the 911 Engineering Company, able to conduct urban search and rescue, even burrowing into the rubble of the White House where it attacked.
For what purpose?
Yeah, well, if it were attacked, you burrow into the rubble to get the president out of the PIOC, right? To get that underground PIOC, right? So if he's stuck in the PIOC and they bomb the place, how the hell you got to get him out? You got to tunnel in there. So they got equipment to do that. So I don't know. I want the audience to go read this. It says he's got over 100 helicopters, continuity of government, marshaling point of embarkation should the continuity of government condition change. Shepard told us all this.
Yep.
And everybody kind of, I won't say everybody, but a lot of people mocked him. And according to Newsweek, Shepard beat you all to this. I mean, Shepard broke this.
Sanest guy anybody knows.
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. So you guys take this for what it's worth. I'm looking at this reaction and I'm reading this story at Newsweek and I'm asking, is this response apropos? Is this what you would do if there was a respiratory virus and nobody was dead in Vietnam or Cambodia? Would this be your reaction? Or does this seem a little bit heavy-handed to you? I don't know the answer. To me, it looks it's a little much.
Well, people in the comments are saying stuff like they see the virus as a possible bioweapon attack, and I agree with that. So perhaps this is preparing for a potential incoming war with China. Maybe they're pissed off that Donald Trump really got the best of them with the trade deal. Who knows? Didn't
Pompeo slip in one of the meetings and said we're in a live exercise, right? Well, this would be the live this document. This would be the live exercise, right? So, I guess again, my understanding of what Shepard was suggesting is the Pentagon using the virus to conduct one of these near-Earth object impact exercises to do a mock scenario. And it just happens that we're in the Lyrid meteor shower right now. So the orbit of Earth and the Lyrid meteor cloud happen to be coinciding. And so I guess it's dark in New York right now, right? So you guys go outside after the show and look up and stay outside for 30 minutes and you're going to see meteors.
Really? Tonight in New York City, I would see that on the roof of this building? I'll go look.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. You are in the Lyrid meteor cloud tonight.
Wow. Let's end the show and I'll go do that.
You're on your way, man. On your way. So Why don't you show everybody that I'm not kidding about the Lyrid meteor cloud, and that tonight is the Lyrid meteor shower. So the Lyrid meteor shower is underway. I think you just passed it, actually. Just go back 1 or 2 pages.
Let's see it.
Yep, Lyrid meteor shower. When and where to see it? Late April, April 16th, April 30th, streaking across the sky.
No, it's the
So
17th.
you're in there.
Today.
The Lyrid meteors streak across the sky between April.
Oh, got it.
See, you got to read the instructions.
I think I need to get a better camera to see that, though.
There you go. There you go. So we're in it. We're in the meteor. And again, and we've got a whole bunch of near Earth objects, and we're in the midst of it. So goodness knows what's going on.
Well, John, it's been another great report, man. I have to say, you're bringing forward a lot of excellent evidence and information for people who are seeing John for the first time. Every Friday, John and I are doing a sponsor-exclusive show. People can watch it by becoming sponsors on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen or patreon.com/IamJohnCullen. Of course, sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth can also see the show on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's really important that viewers become sponsors. We can't keep doing these shows without your support. And I want to thank all of the generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors who have made this show possible. I thank everybody for watching. Please like and share this video and subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. If you haven't already, you can go back and review all of John's work on the Las Vegas shooting, on this coronavirus investigation, and you can subscribe.
Phil Haney,
of course. John's done extensive work, and I hope that people will subscribe.
Also, I want to take a second and just thank not just the Patreon and Subscribestar subscribers, but there have been a number of patrons out there that have really gone the extra mile and are contributing well above the minimum amount. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you, because that really does move the needle. So for those of you who have been contributing at these higher levels, it's thank you very much, and I'll leave it at that.
Greatly appreciated, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week, John, and wishing you a good weekend, and same to everybody who is watching. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.